Well, my first exposure was my brother, who was 5 years older. He and his guitar player friend were sitting there listening to Close to the Edge, and they invited me in. At the time, I was deep into R&B stuff, you know, Parliament and Earth, Wind and Fire and all this crazy stuff. So I didn't know who Yes was, and they played me the beginning of Close to the Edge, and it was so chaotic and crazy to my virgin ear that I just was puzzled what they were hearing, and I didn't understand it. And they asked me if I liked it. I said, well, it was different, but I don't get it, you know. And then a few weeks later, they were playing it again, and all of a sudden it sounded interesting. I went back in to listen again, and I was like, wow, you know, this is kind of interesting. And a week later, I was borrowing Mike's record to go listen to it myself, and from that point forward, I just became devout lover of Yes music, and have been ever since. It's just, it captured my musical imagination at such a young age that not only was I into the band, but it really formed the kind of thing that I wanted to do in my career, which, as fate had it, led me my path to Yes, and so on and so on. So it was an important moment of musical discovery. Well, I had made, I was working on demos with my partner Bruce Gowdy on a record called World Trade, which was my second record. And Yes was without a lead singer at the time because John was doing Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman Howe. And Yes West, as they were called, were working in California on music, but they had no lead singer. And the gentleman who signed me to Polydor Records at the time was Derek Shulman, who was the lead singer of Gentle Giant, just so happens. He was a huge record company, still is a huge record company guy and mogul in that arena. And he and Chris were talking about various singers because they were on the, Derek was the president of Atco Records at the time, so they were on that label without a singer. And Derek said, well, look, I just left this label with this band called World Trade that I had signed, and you need to meet this singer, Billy Sherwood. So Chris and I were put together through those means, and we went out, Chris and I, and had dinner as the first meeting, and just started immediately clicking and laughing and relating on musical terms and just social things and funny things, and we just hit it off immediately and became fast friends, and then it just kind of went from there. I think we ended up writing The More We Live a couple of weeks later, which was our first try at writing things together, and we both kind of looked at each other when we were done and said, wow, there's something here we should pursue. And so we did, going down the road many years now. But that was the first meeting, and then the first adventure into making music with Chris. We went into the studio to work on it thinking, you know, I would be the lead singer at the time, even though I was the only one who did not want to do it. I was still being pressured to get in there and try. And in that process, we did The More We Live demo, and then we did Love Conquers All, as you mentioned, and we did a song called Say Goodbye and The Lonesome Trail, and there was another song that was in there which I'm forgetting. But through that process of recording, you know, as I mentioned, The More We Live is on Union, and Love Conquers All found its way to the box set. And so those songs, you know, they felt right in the Yes world, even though, you know, it was kind of coming from an outsider, if you will, at the time. A lot of that music also turned into the side project band which Chris and I formed called Conspiracy, and we took those demos that we had done with me singing and made those the first record on there, because we just wanted to get that expression out there musically. But those songs, yeah, they all found a home mostly on the Conspiracy records, but Love Conquers All and More We Live found its way to Yes Records. Essentially, I just transferred the masters, and when the time came, John came in to sing his bits, and then Trevor did his guitar stuff over the top, and we just kind of blended it in there. We had Eddie Offord working in the studio with us there, and we just kind of merged those two guys into the picture a little bit. That whole Union record was strange, how it was coming about with different session players. My brother's on the other half of it as a session musician. He was working with the John Anderson side while I was working with the other guys. And so it came about in a weird way, but essentially it was pretty easy and pretty swift. Love Conquers All was sung by Trevor Rabin, and then he put his guitars down and did his thing. I think you know, TK by then had already put his stuff on there, and I'd worked out the drums with Alan, and you know, I'd played the bass on The More We Live, and when we went to transfer it, I'll never forget telling Chris, okay, today we're recutting the bass, and he said, I don't want to recut the bass. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I like what you did. I said, yeah, but you're Chris Squire, this is a Yes record, you're going to recut the bass. And he said, no, I'm not, I'm going to leave yours. And then that became a thing through the whole session, where Eddie Offer kept turning around and saying, Fishy, re-record the bass. And Chris would go, I don't want to, I want to leave this part he recorded, you know. And that became kind of a joke until one day Chris kind of turned around a little more aggressively and said, I don't want to talk about this anymore, we're leaving the bass. And I thought, all right, he wants to leave the bass. So it was funny sessions, but it was very well shaped, form produced, without you know, the other satellite guys coming in and putting their little last overdubs on. Well, Eddie Offord had more to do that with that mix than I did, because I wasn't really familiar with it, and it was a weird system where they came in almost, which was strange. They came in with it's almost like a mannequin's head, and they had somehow they had the ears were hearing things and interpreting, and it was a very strange setup. I just was unfamiliar with it, so I wasn't too hands-on, but I watched it go down after we made the 2-track mix that went to the album. I kind of watched that happen. It was an interesting process. Yes has come at me in several different angles, and at that point, during that period of talk, I was, yes, you know, I figured they were just doing their thing. I'm done. And then all of a sudden, I get a call from Trevor Rabin, who asked me, you know, we've just finished this album talk, we want you to come out on the road, there's a bunch of guitar parts extra, there's some keyboard parts, you can do this, you know, singing and whatnot. And then I thought, yeah, I'm on tour with Yes, let's go. So we did that, and one of my favorite memories of that whole period and doing that was the beginning of this song called Endless Dream. It's in this crazy time signature, which I never could calculate, but I could play it. Chris was really adamant about doing a double bass thing, and you know, come on down, you'll do this double, we'll play in octaves, and you know, we'll do this whole intro together. And I was like, really, are you sure about that? I mean, you're Chris Squire, you're good out there, you don't need me to come out there. And he said, no, I want you to come out there and do this with me. And so we went out there and did it, and every night I just kept thinking, this is such a strange life. It's like, you know, Chris was my hero, you know, he was my friend, but he was my musical hero, and I'm actually playing with this guy. No one's ever done this or gonna do this. This is a unique gig. So it was a real special thing, and it's too bad we didn't film that tour, but there is a really good bootleg from Chile that goes around on YouTube and captured that moment, and it's there for all time. It's really cool. I'm glad we did it. They were working in San Luis Obispo at the time, and I was in LA in my studio, and Chris phoned me out of the blue and said, we've just finished this live record, we're mixing, but we're kind of it's going slower than we'd like. Is there any way you could get involved and speed this up and bring your expertise? So they came to my studio, and we mixed that record, and everyone was really happy with the band. And again, you know, anytime I've ever worked with Yes, I've always thought this is going to be my last time, because they're probably not going to call again. So we finished that record, and sure enough, I got a call from Chris saying, you know, the guys in the band really enjoyed your work, and we're about to do the follow-up Keys to Ascension 2, and what do you think about producing it, and we'll come to your studio and we'll just all work there. And I thought, yeah, let's do that. So we made what I think is a pretty cool record, and there's some pretty interesting pieces on there. Mind Drive and some of those other pieces are pretty cool. And then when that record was finished, as I was mixing that record, literally, phone rings, and I look over, and John's grabbing the phone, and he's in this good mood like he was, and then all of a sudden I see his demeanor change, and he hangs up the phone, and I said, stop the tape, said, what's going on, is everything okay? And he said, well, Rick Wakeman just quit. So at that point, the whole thing just kind of fractured, and everybody kind of went their separate ways, and I finished mixing the record with Chris, and here we had a record that we'd just done, but there's no band to tour it, you know. So it was in a real state of flux before my eyes, and being the Yes fan that I was and my association with the guys now and everything, I boldly sort of said to Chris, I can't watch my favorite band break up before my eyes. We have to be proactive now and do something. And so we started writing material just to see what would happen. It wasn't with the intention of Yes, but let's write material just to kind of get it out. Chris said to me one day, let's send this to John and see what he thinks. John was living in Hawaii. I said, really? He said, yeah, let's send it. So I made John a slave tape and sent it to him to Hawaii. He sent me back a ton of vocals with a message that said, oh my God, I love this stuff. This is great, you know. And so then we played it for Alan, and Alan said, oh, I want to play on that. And you know, then Steve came into the fray, and before you knew it, this thing was a record and done, and they kind of looked at me and said, this is great, so you'll come out on the road and play keys. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not a keyboard player live. I can fake it in the studio and punch things in and fix some MIDI and whatnot, but I'm not that guy live, you know. But I will play rhythm guitar and come out and support these songs, because I'd written a lot of things on guitar at that point. And I knew the Yes music so well, you know. Steve Howe did multiple layers on records close to the edge and whatnot. So I went in and found the stuff that Steve never really played, that were there, but they just sort of ignored because it's one guitar. So I tried to find my way in that way. And then that record turned into a great tour, which we had, and we had this momentum going, and then we got Bruce Fairbairn involved, and we made The Ladder shortly after that, and toured that, and it was kind of around the end of that period that I could sense there was a change on the horizon coming, and they were seeking to get back to that classic lineup. And I also had a sense in myself that I'd kind of done what I wanted to do with this band in terms of, like, it's alive, you know, and it's here. So I thought, I'm going to go back into my world of production, and I also wanted to make music on a faster pace than Yes did, and you know, I like to move along. So I left the band, and in 2000, and I thought, well, that's that. Time goes by. Chris and I form, you know, we do some live things with Conspiracy, and then I formed another band with Tony Kaye and Alan White and Jimmy Hahn called Circa in that period, and it had its prog-isms and its sort of yes-isms, and we did that. And so I was working on various things and minding my own business, and then out of the blue, Steve Howe called me. Steve called me and said, we're kind of at a stage where we want to bring you in to help produce the backing vocal part of this record and do what you do. And I thought, wow, like Yes is back in my world here again. So of course, you know, whenever they call, I answer the call. I went down to the studio, we did all the backing vocals, got that in order. I met John Davison, who was a really sweet guy, and obviously, you know, they had a vibe going. It was a happy Yes moving forward there. So I went home after those sessions and thought, well, that was fun. That was it again. They're going to go do their thing. And again, you know, Steve called me and said, we're not thrilled with these mixes. Can you mix this record, you know? And I said, sure. So I mixed that album for them, and then now I'm back a little more in communication with them just by proxy. And hey man, we're doing a DVD. Chris calls me, will you mix our live DVD we just did in Mesa or Bristol, whichever one came first, and then the second DVD. And so I'm working with them pretty closely at that point. We get up to 2015, sadly, where Chris has fallen ill, and basically get the most shocking phone call ever of him telling me what's going on, and at the same time asking me, you know, to step in for him while he's dealing with this. And that was an extremely tough time, and it still is when I think about it. It's tough, but Chris really wanted it to happen, you know. It was never thought in my mind that I would play bass in Yes, ever. As much as I grew up worshiping Chris, it was never like, one day I'm going to do your, you know, it never crossed my mind. We all thought Chris was going to outlive us all. he called me to tell me about his illness first. And he sort of hinted around at what he was heading towards, but I didn't pick up on it because the thought wasn't in my mind, which was, he said, I don't want to let down the fans, first of all, because this tour is announced and Toto's opening up for us. I don't want to let the Toto guys down. There's so many people in the crew and the band itself, and and I said to him, Chris, you're Chris Spire, man. It's like, tell them they're gonna have to wait. This is a serious thing you're dealing with. They'll understand, and you take your 6 months to get better, and you come back at it. Many people do. So he said, yeah, I guess so. We'll talk tomorrow. And I said, okay, I'm here. And he calls me the next day and he says the same thing. And I really don't let him. I said, Chris, we talked about this yesterday. You need to tell the band that they need to wait. It's fine. You're going to be okay. Yeah, I guess so. And then the third time he calls me and tells me the story. And I go, Chris, I told you to call the guys. He goes, you're not getting it. I said, because he had an amazing sense of humor all the way through to the end, I must say. He says, you're not getting it. I said, getting what? He goes, I want you to step in for me and do this. And that was the most shocking phone call of them all, because it really, just put it all out there. And after I told him, you got to give me a minute to think about all of what you're saying to me. But of course, there was no way I was going to say no to that, And so I jumped in. And as we all know, from the first phone call he gave me until he was gone, 6 weeks. It happened extremely fast. And no one expected it. And before I know it, it's like, wow, it's like I've got this spot now, and I told him I was going to do this, so I'm going to do this. And have been doing it ever since. And the band still goes on, and the music's great. That's what he wanted to happen. So, I feel like I'm doing my part to honor what his wishes were. And I think one of the coolest things about the transition, if there was anything good about it, was the fact that the fans themselves were very warm and loving and supportive in what Chris wanted to do, and then as I stepped in doing what I do. So I've had the support of the fans themselves, which has been really special and meaningful, because it's just been a crazy road. And I think those who follow Yes, like the diehards like we are, like I am. I mean, I could show you pictures of me at 12 with a Yes shirt on. We want this thing to continue, but along the way, it's got its own journey that's just filled with unique history at this point. And there's people coming and going, and people coming. So I don't think me coming back into it was a shock for most people, because they knew my relationship with Chris. But it was still shocking, nevertheless, to not see Chris. It's been a little easier now touring going forward, because time, is the great healer, as they say. But that first tour was rough, and now we're here on, as we do this on Cruise to the Edge 2019, and they're already advertising 2020 on my TV, so I guess we're gonna go. But it's just like, who would have ever known, this road was paved, and there's some fate involved and some luck and some skill, and they all sort of meet at this crossroads for me that led me to replace my favorite bass player in the world, but be in my favorite band in the world. And it's not many people get to do that, so and I don't take it for granted, believe me. I think about it quite a bit. It's a blessing. So we have been discussing a new album over the last year or so. The fans want a new album right now, but losing Chris and everything, there had to be some time between the idea of just, hey, we're going back in the studio. It just wasn't feeling right to anybody. But I think that now that we've done so many tours and the band's settled, and we've got this sort of format of play that's working, that the conversations are coming up more and more. So we shall see what happens. There's no timeline to it, but the dialogue's begun. So that's the beginning of where things will blossom into a full record. Yes is slow. No, that's not a mystery to anybody. It takes time. So, but I think it's something that we will see, and I know I want to see Yes thriving and going forward. And one of the inspiring things is when you play so many shows as we do, is you see the diehard fans who are there, but they've now brought their kids And, you know, 12-year-old kids are coming up to me going, "Oh my God, I love The Ladder." It's like, really? you know that record? So there's a whole generational thing that's starting, and it is one of those bands that when anyone who's a music lover discovers it, they wonder why they didn't know about it, you know. But so I think that sort of will keep the whole cycle just going and going and going. You know, as I've said, because I was asked, you know, as you replaced Chris, do you think one day somebody will replace you? And my first thought was, slow down. And my second thought was, by the time that happens, we'll probably see AI robots up there like Ava, you know, or Sophia, nailing it like better than any of us could. And there's never any band arguments, and everything's harmonious, and there's no one leaving and coming and going. That's going to be the future.